could talk about distortion. And it's something I've been thinking about lately is like a process I've been doing lately or saying to myself is I love the part of me that is distorted. I love the part of me that feels distorted because nothing separation or things that feel heavy or dense or feel negative or painful, or we hear voices of, I hate myself, you're ugly, you suck, right? Those are voices of things people said to us in the past. Those aren't things that are true. And I talked about this in another video, but when we're, or like we find ourselves really fixating, fantasizing, obsessing about a person, obsessing about doing something that might be a little bit more toxic, whether that's having loose sexual boundaries, being whether that's using different substances as a way of trying to avoid connecting with ourselves, like, oh, I'll use LSD or I'll use psychedelics as a way of gaining greater insights, but then usually it blasts us. And I haven't really used psychedelics too much, but from what I understand is it usually will like kind of move us more out of our body. And while every now and then maybe using like a psychedelic might be helpful, if we find we're using it regularly, it might just be because we're trying to avoid our own internal experience going on. And like when we learn about distortion can be like, I am using my mind and overthinking and overanalyzing and fixating, obsessing about things as a way of avoiding connecting with my body deeper. I'm using substances too often that are knocking me more and more out of my body than actually helping me find a deeper rooted presence in my body. I'm I'm constantly distortion can be I'm constantly focusing on things, on how people, like, I'm constantly watching violent TV shows, I'm constantly watching stories or hearing podcasts about, like, I'm watching the murder pod, listening to the murder podcast. I'm constantly focusing on pornography, which pornography are people who have very, very loose sexual boundaries. And what you learn as you become more conscious and more aware is that sex is something that's sacred. Sex is something that is valuable, and it should be only someone I share with who respects my value fully, who treats me as sacred, who treats me with the words and choices they're making in a supportive, loving way 99.9% of the time. And if it's not someone who's fully supportive, if it's not someone who feels like they are fully understanding me, meeting me, loving me how I'd want to be loved, not someone who goes out of their way to do things that are going to help me follow my passions, help me feel better, help me cultivate greater well-being in my body, it's usually not someone I meant to be physically intimate with. And if you think about like soulmates is one person. It isn't 20 people and you have your pick of the 20. Your soulmate is one person out of 7 billion people. And what are the other 7 billion people in relation? They are brothers, they are sisters, they are fathers, mothers. They are people that are part of your community, not people you should be having sex with. And the more you can have stronger boundaries with who I allow to be physically intimate with, the more clear and decisive and the stronger my intuition becomes, because your intuition is as strong as you are willing to be discerning. And if you're not discerning on who I choose to date or who I choose to have sex with, you're not going to be very clear on what directions to move into life, or what is right for you and what's not good for you, because you're not being discerning in other areas of your life. And everything affects the whole, and the choices you make in one area of your life are going to affect the whole rest of the area of your life. And if we find ourselves constantly focusing on pornography with people with very loose boundaries, we're going to find ourselves having a very distorted view of sex, thinking that sex is something that is like God. And this is like something I experienced using porn, which was like, sex is like God, like sex I should value over everything else. And instead of being discerning of like, would this actually be a safe person for me to be physically intimate with? Would this would this actually be a person who is loving and kind? It just be like, for me, it became, I just want to have sex with everyone because that's what I think is going to make me feel accepted or loved. And that is something we learn by watching other people who have that same viewpoint, which most porn, with most people that are in porn, and porn is something that is, people are ignoring what is actually right for them or what actually would serve their body, and they're tracing adrenaline rushes, they're tracing dopamine highs. And when we use pornography, it's the same thing of, I'm like, everyone's empathic, they can feel what's happening in other people's bodies as they're having sex, and so they're getting a similar dopamine rush, or like maybe less, but still a little bit of a dopamine rush as they watch porn. And it becomes a drug. It becomes, I use this because it helps me feel better for a second. It gives me an instant gratification of dopamine. While it just builds greater fantasies about sex around me, makes me value sex over any level of discernment of what would actually be good for my body, good for me to connect that deeply and intimately with another person. And usually when we're using pornography, like having ideas like, oh, it'd be a good idea for me to have an orgy with people, or oh, it'd be a good idea for me to just have a three-way, like that becomes something we fantasize about. And it's all coming from a place of, the more I have sex, the more validated and accepted I will feel by others. And in truth, it's really just our patterns that were made, maybe when we were growing up, were made to feel like we were made to feel worthless, we were made to feel unlovable, unaccepted. We were taught by the people that raised us how unworthy we are, that our boundaries weren't sacred, that they could trample over or walk over us whenever we wanted. And then when we grew up, we became attracted to activities that had that same level of unworthiness, that same level of hidden pain within them, same level of toxicity. And we realize that the stronger boundaries I have, the more clear and decisive I become, the more I see people clearly, and the less I'm relating to life from my fantasies, and the more I'm feeling into my body as I make choices and go, is this actually something that's feeding greater well-being within me, or is this feeding my patterns? And when we're thinking about distortion is always relating to life from our ideas of life, rather than what is actually serving my greatest well-being, rather than what's actually serving my greatest level of power. What would actually be the choice for me to make that might be hard for me to make, but is helping me have greater freedom from choices where I'm just tracing adrenaline rushes, rather than let me just chase this adrenaline rush and have an experience that will feel good for a moment and ignore how shitty or shameful or guilty I feel afterwards. And when we're thinking about sexual boundaries, just to bring it home, like, I think one of the things to be aware of is, am I chasing pleasure over being aware of what is actually serving my well-being over being aware of actually taking the time to get to know a person, or thinking about how is this going to change our relationship dynamic if I am physically intimate with this person, right? If we have a good friendship and I move into dating this person, is it something that I feel like long-term, 5-10 years down the road, is actually going to still work? Or is it someone who I just want to feel a deeper connection with, and I feel like sex is the way to do that without being aware of, is this someone I could actually see myself with in 5 years and 10 years? Or are there things that I don't want to look about like that they do that I don't want to see? Because oftentimes when relating to life from our ideas, or we're finding ourselves in many relationships that end up that people we're dating that doesn't work out, it's usually because we're relating to people, or we're either moving too quickly, or we are relating to people from our ideas of them rather than actually relating to them to where they are actually at in the moment. And a lot of teachers, or even like probably therapists, call this like relating to people's potential. And it's like, who is this person actually right in front of me in this moment? And if this person never changed for the rest of their life, would I be willing to be committed in dating this person? Because if they're not right at the beginning, they might change and grow, but they still will change and grow in a way that's not quite right. And we have to be willing. I'm not looking for 30 people that are pretty close. I'm looking for the one person that fully understands me, that fully relates to me how I want to be related to, and is willing to, and is helping me grow my passion and my purpose on this journey of my life. And they are someone who is equally serving either a very similar or same passion and purpose in their life. And when we're thinking about that level of discernment, it becomes very clear that the people that might be attractive, that I have a lot in common with, still most of the time are not going to be the right person for me, are not going to be a person I should date. It's just someone I have a little bit more in common with. And when we think about like our partner, when we're thinking about if we're really going to be willing to date someone based on soulmate, or try and call in the highest relationship possible for our lifetime, it's 1, a willingness to be alone, and it's 2, being willing to say the people that are pretty close aren't quite close enough for me. Because pretty close is still long-term, means it won't work out. And you can think maybe it will work out, but if you play out the next 10 or 20 years, you would find eventually you'd get to a point where you're either just trying to stick it out, or it's starting to feel more like brothers and sisters living together than it is like a romantic partnership, or you're finding that is really 10 years down the road, it's like, oh, I really need to leave this relationship. And we learn that it isn't so much about trying to find a partner as it is building community, which is what I kind of touched on in the last video. And the greater community I build, the less of a craving of a partner I have, and the easier it is for me to be discerning about who is really going to be right for me on all levels, and who is someone I just have a little bit more in common with, but would be better off as a friend. And if we find ourselves craving physical intimacy, that's usually a sign of I'm just craving a deeper connection with this person, and my mind or my brain interprets physical intimacy as having a deeper connection with someone. But it's really, when we're having physical intimacy with someone, is really something that should be sacred, something that we should only share with someone that we fully want to be more like. And if we just kind of want to be more like them, then they're probably not someone we should share that level of intimacy with, because we are going to pick up their good qualities as well as their bad qualities. And you can think about, is the person even if the person I'm dating, are they as aware and as conscious as me? Are they making choices that I would choose for myself? Are they serving well-being with the words they say to myself, or with the ways they care for me? Or are they doing things that sometimes feel hurtful, or sometimes feel like a put down, or sometimes feel judgy? And am I really trying to be more like this person? And if we're dating someone who doesn't feel as conscious or aware as us, or maybe has habits like they use weed or substance or pornography or other substances way more than we do, or they constantly yell about politics, or constantly have some viewpoint that feels rather righteous than it does loving and caring, are we really trying to jump in a pool or that's a little bit more toxic or polluted, which is basically what we're doing every time we're having physical intimacy with that person? And it's something to be incredibly aware of. Is sex is sacred. Sex is something, it's the most vulnerable thing we can share with another person, and it's like we're jumping into the waters of another person. And if we don't want to fully be like them, why are we being physically intimate with them? And when we're thinking about distortion and pain loves making things that are sacred less sacred. It loves making things that are valuable and making them less valuable, or subtly wearing them down, or subtly putting people down, because it understands the more unworthy pain understands, or unconsciousness understands, the more unworthy I can make people feel, the more they are going to be controllable, and the more they are going to make me their God. The more people get lost in distortion, the more they are willing to listen to their distortions. And the more people use pornography, the more people watch people getting murdered regularly, the more people watch the murder channel, the more people harmonize their body to people that have to energies or people that have loose boundaries, the more people harmonize their body to watching people constantly get hurt, the more their words and actions will subtly be hurtful towards themselves, towards others. The less discerning they will become on what's actually serving their greatest well-being, and the more they are going to follow their fantasies than follow what is reality, which is reality is what is actually feeling good in my body. And the more people get lost in pain, the less and less they're going to be able to feel what is good for them and what is not good for them, and the more they will be devoured and eaten alive by pain, and pain will become their God. And like, the people that are most lost in this are the people that are murderers, the people that harm people regularly, and they become so out of tune with their heart that they can't feel how any of their words or actions are affecting other people, and they are just tracing adrenaline rushes because at least it makes them feel something. And that's pain's agenda. And subtler forms of pain, or when we move further along our healing journey, it just becomes I overthink rather than, or I obsess, or I fixate, or I respond in ways that are subtly more emotionally, or I say things that are subtly hurtful that I regret afterwards, but my pain took me over for a moment. And when we are coming from a place of obsessing, of fixating, of saying things where we go, oh, I shouldn't have said that afterwards, it's a good sign we're just in need of greater love. And love is what heals any pain and any distortion, and it pulls our little demon children who are hiding in the recesses of our body. It like throws a little light lasso around them and slowly pulls them back into the love and light and wholeness of our heart that is within us. It is not outside of us. It is not an experience. And if we are finding ourselves constantly focusing on something where people are constantly arguing, whether that's on TV, we're constantly watching things that are drama filled and adrenaline rushes, can we choose that a little less? Because the less we choose, the more often we choose, the less we choose that, the more we are going to find ourselves slowly losing our addiction to stimulation and adrenaline rushes, and the more peace is going to erupt in with our body, because everything you focus on is what grows within you. And when people hurt you in your past, so when you have a universe within you, every person that is born is a microcosm of the universe, and everything outside of you lives within you. And it doesn't mean that people that are hurtful are also wounds within yourself. It just means they are showing you how they can't meet your love, right? If you come up loving and joyful and someone says something shitty back to you, they're saying, hey, that love is like a bright light shining on my crankiness, and I'm going to say something cranky or shitty or awful as a way of pushing away that light or trying to dim that light, so I don't have to look at my negative ideas about myself or my negative ideas about the world. And just as a little aside, like why Jesus was crucified was he was such a bright light that he was challenging all the negative ideas people had about themselves and the negative ideas people had about the world. And the people that crucified him took it as an attack. They took it as he's attacking my ideas, he's attacking my beliefs, and my beliefs and ideas keep me safe. And he's attacking my safety, so we will kill him as a way of protecting our safety and protecting our comfortability as we are, because light is constant change. Light is awareness. And if we don't want to look at ourselves and we don't want to change, light becomes something foreign that's attacking us. And we then try and put people down, or even try and snuff out people's innocence or their love or their joy as a way of staying and avoiding change. And it's what happened to Jesus, and it's what happens to most light workers on this planet in subtle ways. We don't all get murdered like Jesus, and just because you're a light being doesn't mean you're more likely to get murdered. We're at a place in consciousness where luckily there's enough society structure that the people that are dark and harm people are able to avoid the light beings enough where oftentimes they are more just harming people that are already very dim. I don't know. I'm trying to say something comforting. I feel like that wasn't that comforting, but we are, the light beings are we're at a place in history where people aren't getting crucified walking down the street, where enough people are aware enough that it isn't so foreign to most people, and that our light is now something that is a little bit, might be too much for some people, but for most people they can handle it. And so we're at a place where our light is our power. It isn't something that is going to cause us being harmed, and there's no reason to say if I become a brighter version of myself or a more free, authentic version of myself, that's going to put me in harm. That's just a wound from our past lives or simultaneous lives. That isn't where society, our world is at in this moment, at least in the United States and probably in most countries. In most countries, we live in in most parts of the world, it is safe enough to be your free, authentic self and to shine your light. That will only help free people more, because people have started to let in the light rather than are in full avoidance of the light most of the time. And if someone's hurtful or abusive, it's usually a good sign of, this is not someone I'm meant to spend time with, and my light is not helping melt their abuse. I'm just being harmed and reminded more and more of my pain and becoming more like them rather than helping free them. And so when we're thinking about ideas, to bring it back to the original, and thoughts, is when I'm overthinking, when I'm overanalyzing, It's my way of my mind thinking, if I can understand this, then I can control it. And we always are coming from a place of trying to understand or overthinking or overanalyzing, thinking it's keeping us safe, but it's really just keeping us trapped in meeting the moment. And how the moment should be met, which is, I'm curious and interested in what would actually be the best thing for me to say in this moment, rather than I've already planned out 5 different responses if this person says one of these words. And oftentimes, maybe it's okay to have a little plan, but we shouldn't be too attached to it, because oftentimes the person ends up showing up way different than we even imagined. And when we're thinking about when I overthink things, when I overanalyze what's happening, it's usually a sign of, like, I know for me, like, if something happens where I feel like I didn't stand up for myself very well, or something happened that's painful, I tend to overanalyze, overthink, and it's really my inner artist saying, if you can express this, it will help move the pain you're feeling around this situation, and your mind will need to plan a lot less, because our mind is overthinking of saying, I need to express this pain. And so oftentimes when we're overthinking, overanalyzing, it's our body telling us we need to spend a little bit more time expressing in art. And if we feel like there's something we could have said that would stand up for ourselves more, or vocalize our side of things or our power, and we didn't get to say it, that would be a good time to express through your voice. I'd say, like, singing songs, or if you're not really into singing, you could do like a spoken word poetry thing. And even if it's just for yourself, the fact of using and expressing through your voice will help you become better at expressing when you need to express through your voice. And this is something, it still comes up for me rather regularly, of like, oh, I could have said something, I didn't, I was too scared. And it's something I'm working on too. But if we spend time creating art that isn't really aligned with the same feelings that whatever the painful situation is bringing up within us, just the fact of doing art is helping circulate new energy within our heart chakra that will help move the pain, help us feel lighter, and will help calm our mind down. And when we're thinking about what we obsess, fixate, fantasize about in the distortions in our mind and body, can we say, I love the part of me that obsesses, as a way, I love the part of me that fixates, I love the part of me that fantasizes, I love the part of me that is hyper-focused on this person or this situation happening in my life, as a way of lassoing the darker aspects of ourselves and pulling them closer and closer to our heart, because our heart is peace. And if our mind is trying, and our heart is all-knowing, and the more we are bringing love into our body and harmonizing our body with love, the more we are able to rest in our all-knowingness, rest in our wholeness, and the less we'll need to think about or overanalyze how we're going to show up in a moment. And the more we love the parts of ourselves that obsess or fixate or fantasize, the more our obsession and our fixation gets aligned with love, and our love, and it just becomes it starts to become lighter expressions of itself, and we then start to be able to take that obsession and put it more into our passions, or putting it more into serving our well-being, rather than it just being focused on situations or people or things that are not good for us. And we learn that I transform my negative patterns through love, and the more I love my negative patterns, I love my distortions, I love the illusions, the more I'm reclaiming more of that energy to pour into my passions and pour into finding greater well-being in my life. And it starts with, can I love this part of myself? And if I feel like I can't love it, you can just ask your angels or guides, angels, please love this distortion on my behalf. Angels, please love the sexual fantasies on my behalf. Angels, please love the please love this hyperfixation on this person or this thing on my behalf. And when we feel that start to come up, we can just repeat it. Like I'd say I like to do it multiple times. So if I'm feeling like I'm fantasizing, because I sometimes have sexual fantasies, if I feel that's coming up, I'll just say it like 3 times, I'd say 3 to 5 times. Angels, please love the sexual fantasies on my behalf. Angels, please love the sexual fantasies on my behalf. Angels, please love the sexual fantasies on my behalf. As a way of, it doesn't always have to be on me to love the parts of myself that are distorted, or you could even say, angels, please love this distortion on my behalf. You don't even have to name it if you're not sure really where it's coming from or what it is. And it's a way of taking pressure off yourself to always have to be the one that heals or loves yourself, because it isn't all on you. You got a team behind you, and you just have to call on them, because they can only oftentimes step in when you ask for help. And sometimes they can do things behind the scenes, but the more you call on them, the stronger their energy will become within you and within your field, and the more they'll be able to influence you, the stronger intuition you will have, and the more they will be able to help you with things that you ask for help on. And this last little point before I end this talk, I want to talk about desires, because I think like sometimes we think the desire I'm feeling is just my desire, or even pain, like the pain I'm feeling is just my pain. I'll talk about pain first because I think it'll go well. So when we're thinking about pain, the pain within you, while other people may have caused that pain while your experiences may have been unique, that caused the pain of unworthiness or harm or feeling unlovable or ugly. The feeling of ugly or unlovable or unworthiness is something that almost many humans share. Almost all humans share some degree of that within them. And when you heal yourself, or you're willing to love your unworthiness, or you're willing to remind yourself, I am enough, I am worthy, I deserve love, I deserve greater intuition, I deserve clearer boundaries, I deserve clarity, and like even setting the tension, may I see everyone clearly and honestly so I know who I'm meant to get close to and who I'm not meant to get close to. That intention of may I see everyone clearly and honestly is enough to help you start to see through any distortions you have and start to see people clearer and honestly more often. And as we start to focus on becoming aware of our pain and starting to heal it, we are not just healing it within ourselves, but it's almost like our pain of unworthiness is a blanket that runs through many people's bodies. And as we burn it out of ourselves, we're lighting a little flame in other people's bodies that share some unworthiness. And that flame, maybe over years, slowly picks away at their unworthiness too. And the more people that start to become aware of their pain and stop feeding their pain and starts to search for greater well-being in their life, the faster the blankets with an all of unworthiness, of unlovability, of ugliness, of self-hatred, of hatred for others starts to be burned out of them. And when people talk about the veil, that's what they're really talking about, is the veils of darkness that people see their life through and relate to themselves through and relate to others through. The veils of judgment, anger, hatred. And it doesn't mean we can't feel angry, but if we're constantly coming from anger, that's usually a good sign that it's aligned in unconsciousness rather than love, rather than just the expression of our heart's passion in that moment. And when we're thinking about desires, I would also say something I've noticed maybe in the last 6 months is when I feel desires, they're not just my desires, but they're usually shared with another person, and we are both feeling the desire. It's not mine, it's not theirs. And the more empathic we become, the more we are going to start to open up and feel, oh, I'm feeling this desire right now, and I'm not even sure if it's mine. It doesn't really feel like something I should act on. And maybe me just feeling it is helping it burn out of this other person. Like if someone's used to having a romantic partnership, they just broke up with that person, and they're detoxing from having that, like, that physical intimacy, and they think maybe we're going to be the person that's going to meet their sexual desires. They will then project those desires onto us, and when we're spending time with them, we will feel a stronger sexual desire for them, but it's not even our desire. We're just feeling what's being healed out of them. And it's actually a very interesting perspective of, my desires are not necessarily my desires. My desires could be what's being healed out of another. My desires could just be what's being passed through me to help be returned back to the light. And even if we feel like a really strong desire to kiss someone that we're spending time with, and we go, I don't really want to kiss them. What if that desire is what's being healed out of them, and you're helping feel it and heal it out of them a little bit more efficiently by your willingness to feel it as well? And it isn't actually yours. And what if our desires aren't ours? What if our pain isn't ours but the world's? And as we heal ourselves, we aren't just healing ourselves, we're healing the world. As we feel our desires rather than feeding them, we aren't just freeing ourselves from the hold and control of desire, but we're helping free the world. So I hope that helps. Thank you for listening.